the important point that I think many people miss in discussing the Mirai is, again, fixating on the hydrogen, fixating on the fuel cell. We've been over that time and time again, and I don't think the answer for that has changed at all. In fact, I know the answer for that hasn't changed. All of those facts are still the same. The important thing about Mirai is that it's Toyota's first EV. That's the really key thing about this car. This is Toyota's first EV. It doesn't matter what the storage method is less important, although that's the thing that Toyota's talking about. The thing, and everybody else for that matter, hydrogen fuel cell, hydrogen fuel cell. This is Toyota's first EV. They only made 3,000 of them, but as a first attempt at making an EV, it has merit. It has a lot of good qualities, as well as some not as good qualities. So I'm going to ignore talking about hydrogen in this review, and I'm going to focus on talking about the Mirai as an electric vehicle, because it is an electric vehicle. So some random observations about the Mirai. I took it up to Palomar Mountain, as you've probably seen already, or maybe as you've seen already in this video. And it's a mountain that I've been up countless times in countless numbers of vehicles. Not so much for testing, although a little bit for that, but just because I love that place and I lived here for so long. And I want to tell you, this shocks me. This vehicle was probably one of the best vehicles I've ever driven up that super windy switchback road. It performed beautifully in every way: steering, handling, acceleration. It's crazy. I didn't expect that. And so if I get one choice of one car to drive up and down Palomar Mountain, one of my favorite places on the planet, this one, the Mirai. Why? I don't know, but because it worked. It just was. So evaluating the Mirai as an EV, how does it compare? Well, it's interesting. It's very Toyota. It drives like a big, heavy car, which in some circumstances is nice, and in others, it's not as nice. It's nimble. It's not a big, huge car that you can't drive in town, and it's comfortable on the freeway. Although, interestingly enough, on the freeway it seems to drift a little bit, or maybe that's just this one. It seems to pull a little bit. Which is weird because on hard cornering and switchbacks and stuff, it handles beautifully. It doesn't have the jump, the pep, for lack of a better word, that most EVs have. It's definitely spunky, but it's not fast by any means. And again, I feel like that's a function of the weight of the vehicle. Or at least, again, what feels like the weight. It feels kind of tubby. It drives a little bit like a boat. Again, not in a bad way, but it doesn't. I don't think Toyota intended it to drive like a Porsche. You know, it doesn't have that direct contact with the road. It doesn't have that feel. My one digression, and again, my apologies for this, when I'm going to talk about hydrogen, is the Mirai performance with hydrogen. It's poor. The vehicle has ostensibly a 230-ish mile range, maybe 215, maybe 240, depending on how much hydrogen you manage to pump into it. I drove a good amount of miles in this car. In fact, let's look and see what I drove. 371 miles. That's going to be over 400 miles by the time I'm done with this car. It used a lot of hydrogen. And by a lot of hydrogen, I mean the cost per mile to operate this vehicle is cray-cray. Now, Mirai owners and lessors are not paying for the hydrogen. Toyota is. And the kind of the quiet word about Mirai has already been that this is a money loser for Toyota. That they, built this small number, this 3,000 number worldwide, 1,600 here, I believe, and 1,400 in Japan. Maybe it's the other way around. Again, as an experiment to get carb credits, whatever. It's a compliance car. It's not intended to be a mainstream vehicle. Clearly, it's not practical in that sense. So cost to operate because of the hydrogen is crazy expensive. So what are the drawbacks to Mirai as an EV? Again, it feels heavy. There's a lot of luxury stuff in here. All the seats are motorized. There's a rear HVAC. They're big, heavy seats. It seems to me this vehicle was clearly not engineered to be a lightweight, high-efficiency electric vehicle. This was engineered to be a luxury car that happened to be an EV powered by fuel cells. So in that sense, the performance is uncommon for an EV. It's atypical. And not especially in a bad way, but in a way that, again, I think you'd feel some of the, you get that EV grin quicker if it didn't have this weight, if it was jumpier off the line, if the acceleration curve. And I think this might be something that Toyota did intentionally. It drives a little bit like an ICE car, and not in a bad way, but in a way that ICE car owners would get in this and go, oh, okay, I get this. So I mentioned the car tends to pull a little bit, and that might just be this vehicle. It might not be designed into Mirai in general, and you have to watch that doing these reviews. Sometimes, maybe the person before you ran up some curbs or something, and who knows. Trunk space is good. It's not great. It's not huge, but it's certainly adequate for most people's needs. You can see the trunk. There it is. Yay! There's a little glimpse of the area where the hydrogen tank is. It's back there. It doesn't really matter any more than seeing your gas tank matters. People care about this because it's a hydrogen tank and not a gas tank, and they, pretend they've seen gas tanks. Most people haven't seen gas tanks. It's a metal box that holds gasoline. This happens to be a carbon fiber tube that holds hydrogen gas. So in that sense, it's exotic, it's interesting. In a realistic sense, I don't think it's interesting at all. It's just another aspect of the car. So let's talk about the Mirai controls. Toyota, again, I think really wanted to make a statement with this vehicle. There's lots of shiny stuff in here. There's lots of kind of carbon fibery looking stuff that's very pretty. It has capacitance controls in the center console that control the HVAC system, the seat heater, the steering wheel heater, the power modes. I'm still up in the air. I'm not a big fan in general of capacitance controls because they're so easy to false positive. And if I pick up my drink the wrong way out of the little cup holder, I turn on the seat heater. And in California, not so much interested in the seat heater. Not so much interested in the steering wheel heater. At least in San Diego, California now. Maybe up north, you turn on your seat heater by mistake, no big deal. Okay, I get that. No harm, no foul. The steering wheel controls are pretty much the same as any Toyota that you've seen. There's nothing new there. Same with the window controls and the locks. A couple of interesting buttons on the dash. In fact, there's one interesting button labeled H2O. And when you press that, the vehicle, through a vertically or a down-facing port in the rear of the vehicle, vents all of the excess water that's accumulated in the system. Why it does this rather than dripping out is beyond me. In fact, it actually does drip out a little bit at a time every time you stop the car. And I've been told by people that have followed the car that actually when you're driving it, if you punch the accelerator, you'll see a little spray of mist come out of the back of this. You'll see some water vapor emit. So clearly it emits water. This leads me to think that the H2O buttons kind of a ploy, kind of a novelty. Go, you know what I'm going to say here, go water the flowers. Mirai also has Toyota Safety Sense, but it doesn't have the Safety Sense suite. In fact, the thing you have to keep in mind with Mirai is that it's a 2016 vehicle, but it's actually more like a 2013 or 2014 vehicle because of when it was designed. So it has older versions, and it doesn't have everything that even like the new entry-level Toyota vehicles have. Which is odd, but again, it's just a function of what this is. This is a very limited production vehicle, so that's not surprising. Back to the ergonomics. The navigation is standard Toyota Nav. The Entune suite of apps is here. The stereo's nice, not bad. Maybe one of the nicer Toyota stereos that I've heard. The car seems to be very, very quiet. They have apparently tried very hard with Mirai to very well insulate sound-wise noise, and they've done a fine job of that. This is a very quiet car, and that's a good place to start from. You want the car to be as quiet as possible inside. Unless you want to ride on a motor, then just buy a motorcycle, okay? Grow up. I love motorcycles. There's nothing wrong with that. But cars should be quiet inside to start with, and then you add the noise you want. If it's engine noise, then fine, put on a silly muffler. If it's music, then turn up the stereo, for God's sakes. I'm not going to talk about hydrogen. I don't care about hydrogen. You don't care about hydrogen. Hydrogen isn't a viable fuel for a vehicle. Fuel cells are wonderful. I'm sorry. Hydrogen isn't a viable fuel for the vast majority of consumer-owned vehicles. You don't care about it. You're not going to own it. You're not going to pay for it. It's not going to happen. So let's ignore the hydrogen fuel cell part of this vehicle that everybody likes to talk about because it's so interesting. Water vapor comes out the back. This is Toyota's first electric vehicle. Right here. This is the Pioneer. This is the thin end of the edge of the wedge. This is the state of the art. This is the best that Toyota can do in making an electric vehicle. And I think from that standpoint, this vehicle is absolutely fascinating.